This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at Kevin Kautzman and at Brad Kelly. Right, Art of Darkness. We're back for another episode. This one has it all, Brad.
All of it.
Everything that you could want out of an Art of Darkness episode.
Excellent. Good.
This is going to have sex.
Okay.
It's going to have travel. It's going to have vitamin shots, which are in fact amphetamines.
Ah, yes. Back when the vitamins worked, you know?
It's going to have right. Yeah, take your vitamins, kids. It's going to have a contested cause of death. I mean, It has it all. Drama, very high stakes on this episode.
Okay.
And today we're going to talk about the singular, arguably the greatest playwright of the 20th century, Tennessee Williams. This has some personal meaning.
The state was named after him, or he was named after the state?
Very famously, an entire state named after him. No, he actually, we'll get to this, but he took the name because his paternal grandparents, his paternal line came through Tennessee.
I see.
And it had a bit more of a ring than Tom.
I see. I always thought it was a bad BMF first name. I think it's an awesome first name.
Hey, look, it has a real ring, and this is a person who had a wonderful sense of the dramatic, but also the poetic, which is something that we're gonna touch on. And I have some personal connections to Tennessee in kind of an abstracted, refracted way, which we'll get to in the course of the episode. So we'll have a little bit of a personal stuff in here too. This has been a real fun one to research. Brad, we usually begin every episode with the person who's presenting asking the other person, in this case, me, I will ask you, what do you know about Tennessee Williams?
I don't know a whole lot. I know he wrote one of my favorite films. He wrote Streetcar Named Desire as a play, and that was adapted into film, and that was, I don't know if that was Marlon Brando's breakout role, but it was certainly a big tent pole in his career.
It made Brando.
It made Brando, okay. And also wrote the play behind one of my favorite films, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And other than that, I don't know much about him personally. I always assumed he was from the South. I mean, his films, the stories that inspired the films are Southern in character. So I always assumed he had some connection to the South. And that's about it, honestly.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I've learned a lot of things about Tennessee. I knew maybe a little more than you because of my personal background as an American playwright. You don't get out of the shadow of someone like Tennessee. You simply don't. Very interesting figure. I forgot to mention too, we're going to have venereal disease is going to come up here at some point. Yeah.
Good. We haven't really.
We're just playing the hits here. Just playing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm sure we've come across it, but maybe haven't foregrounded it the way we're going to in this episode.
Okay.
So buckle up, and
right.
I'm going to try not to be too linear with Tennessee here.
Okay.
We'll dart around a little bit. One of his famous lines from the Glass Menagerie, which is the play that made him, which is very autobiographical, and it's sort of about himself and his sister, who will figure heavily here.
Okay.
The line is, "The play is memory. The play is memory." And so with Tennessee and his work, you may people will occasionally suggest that his work is realistic. There's a lot of realism in his plays, but it's this unique combination of realism and expressionism in his work, where you drift in and out of memory and this high poetic language into the sort of crashing hard realism. I think that he peaked in that sense with Streetcar, but we'll get to all of that.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, Thomas Lanier Williams III. He was born in Columbus, Mississippi, saying English, Welsh, and Huguenot ancestry. His mother was named Edwina, and his father was named Cornelius Coffin Williams, which I think is a funny middle name, Coffin, C.C. Williams. I need to find the year that he was born. He was born in 1911, so we're going to place him right around, I suppose right kind of in the middle of World War I in Mississippi. So let's kind of like anchor ourselves there. His mother was the daughter of an Episcopal reverend. Okay. So we've come from this sort of Episcopal family. You could sort of say middle class, solidly middle class. He had one sister, Rose, and a brother whose name I think was his name escapes me offhand, but I'll come back to it. And one thing I should mention about Tennessee is that he's not maybe as far removed as you would think. He lived into the 80s.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So there's something about where he peaked in the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
Where like my brain puts him kind of in a more old-timey place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's scrap that a little bit and try to, One thing I've encountered too with Tennessee and the media that I've been picking up about him is that it's like so much of this stuff where there's a danger in representing this as kind of like high culture, right? These are the great plays. These were salacious, sexy, erotic, dangerous plays. They still are. And his work, when Hollywood got their hooks into it, was completely marketed with the sort of licentiousness and the sort of
cleavage on the poster, probably.
Sure. And in one of the movies, The Rose Tattoo, which is based on one of his plays, there's a scene where they go into a strip club, and you can just see, what was it? I think it was called the Hays Code. There was a code, the Hollywood Code. You could just imagine they probably had a representative from the church, if not on the set, looking at the dailies going, you can show leg for just that much amount of time.
Right.
But even with that, he would encounter all sorts of trouble. There's one like A&E biography of Tennessee where there's a scholar who at some point talks about him being one of the first casualties of alcohol and drug use. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This man was slipped into that in the 60s, in the 70s. I'm pretty sure there were plenty of cases before. Yeah. There's just a lot of like, I don't know how to say this in a nice way. Once the academics get a hold of something like this, it dries it out and you lose all the sex. They put all the sex out of it. And I want to re-inject that into this. Tennessee Williams was a sex addict.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Right. He very, very famously, would say that a day where he didn't end up in somebody's bed was a day wasted.
So was he? Well, now I got to ask: was he into boys or into girls?
Yeah, he was homosexual.
Okay.
And this is another in the Art of Darkness pantheon that we're the dark pantheon that we're creating here. We're not that far away from Oscar Wilde.
Not really, no. Right? I mean, when was Tennessee born again?
1911. So Wilde, I think, died in the year 1900.
Okay.
I think. So we're not that far away. So the times they are a change in here. And Tennessee, and I want to talk about that at length. So we'll get to it. Okay, fun. But his body of work really seems to focus. Well, there are a lot of themes, but you'll hear people say, Streetcar is about the death of the American dream. No, it's not. They didn't even think about the idea of the American dream didn't even really exist until 1931 when it was popularized.
When some marketing firm came up with it, probably, right?
Right. Yeah, it was some academic or some book or something. No, the Streetcar is about the legacy South encountering the industrial North. It's about a myriad of things. It's Southern Gothic, and it's forbidden eros is at the heart of his stuff. Right. And a lot of the films, particularly the ones that are a little more middling, when you see them, they're queer coded. So you would go to that movie if you were hip. you would see one thing. If you're a Philistine, you'd go, oh, that was an interesting movie. You're not seeing that these characters are standing in for relationships and that are forbidden. We'll get to it. So fine. All right. So let's get into his psychology. So I was going to talk about his parents. His father was an alcoholic shoe salesman, which,
kind of Al Bundy kind of figure.
Well, you don't want to think too much about Al Bundy because this is at a time where you could be a shoe salesman. Well, gee whiz, I'm on the road selling shoes,
Yeah,
and he did eventually get promoted to like a manager.
Okay.
Which took them to St. Louis, to the big city of St. Louis. And that really affected Tennessee in his life because it pulled him away from his grandparents. And once his father came into the home, it was not a good scene. His father was abusive. And his mother was, they say, mentally unstable, Edwina. Little off-kilter, Edwina. And extremely puritanical about sex. So Edwina, to the point where dad's a drunk at home, and when he would approach Edwina for a little bit of the old going back to our Kubrick episode, a little of the old in out, she would freak out and like start running around the house screaming.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah, good times.
But the drama of that feels like something I could see in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof or something.
Right. He is an exquisitely biographical playwright to the point where when he finally gets around to writing the Glass Menagerie, which would be his first big hit, he's pulling directly from his and his family's life in the tradition of Eugene O'Neill, I would say in that case. Although one thing that Tennessee himself said, and I should say there are some very, very good interviews with him later in life. We may even pause and play in fact, we will pause and play a portion of 2 interviews with him to kind of place him in time and also to hear his voice. Yeah. Again, he's closer to us than you might think. There's something about the way I think our public schools teach these playwrights that almost like puts them into a different world. You go, oh, yes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, you were alive when Tennessee was alive, albeit briefly.
Yeah. I didn't realize that. I would have, I guess if you would have, sort of take a roll of the dice, where do you think? I guess I would have guessed he died in the 60s. I don't know, but
his career did.
Right.
See, and this is something we'll get to. Unfortunately, yeah. But he did himself no services there. So when he was a young child, right, his brother's name was Walter Williams, Walter Dakin Williams, and then Rose Isabel Williams. So his older sister and a younger brother. He was a middle. Well, when he was very young, Tennessee, or Tom at the time, nearly died from a case of diphtheria. What is diphtheria? Do you know?
I don't really know, actually.
It's one of those that you hear about and you go, what is diphtheria? Let's look it up real quick.
Symptomatically what it's like. Isn't it one that you get, like, kids get vaccinated for now, I think? Like,
I would hope so. I don't know. It's a bacterial infection.
Okay.
And it caused him a lot of trouble. And obviously when he was very young, and he was very needy already, a mama's boy, and this exacerbated that. And so what we have in Tennessee is an almost archetypal case of a, gosh darn it, I think my son's a queer kind of a situation.
Okay.
Not to be impolite about it, but I think that's pretty much how it's described. And, his father was a descendant of East Tennessee pioneer stock, had a violent temper, used his fists, and he thought his son was effeminate. Meanwhile, Edwina, who's in this unhappy marriage, starts to focus on Tennessee. So you have a case where here's a young boy who withdraws into letters and avoids what you would sort of consider to be the more traditionally masculine pursuits. So it's a recipe for a tortured genius here with Tennessee.
Sure.
So they go to live in St. Louis. he goes to high school there. They talk about, in some of the biography, they talk about how he was tortured. It was not a good time for an effeminate lad who's interested in poetry in St. Louis.
Right, I can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. So, but he's starting to show an interest in high school in writing, and he has a short story published, actually, in an issue of Weird Tales.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's kind of surprising.
Which I think is fun, because I was going to say Streetcar. You could make a case that Streetcar is in the Lovecraft universe. I'm joking, of course, but it's a horror. It's a horror.
Oh yeah,
story.
Yeah. It taps into the same emotional core for sure as horror does.
The way that Lovecraft is all about madness and being afraid that you might go mad. Blanche is a Lovecraftian character.
Yeah, no, it's true.
She sleeps with one of her students, is driven out of town, and ends up in New Orleans in this tenement type situation. There really is an element of horror. To Streetcar.
And so and then also the what if thing, or I'm sorry, Strange Tales, right?
Weird Tales, yeah.
Weird Tales. So that kind of makes sense, because the way you're describing it, which I didn't really appreciate until now, is Tennessee was doing something that was almost like a literary pulp, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah, you can make the poster sort of a torn blouse and sort of tawdry and all of that, but once you actually get into it, he's doing a lot more than just that.
Yeah, so he wrote a short story here, which I had not read, but it's called The Vengeance of Nitocris, a short story. He wrote it when he was 16 years old. He was paid $500 in today's money.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So there you go. So he's 16 years old, and that's nice. You get a little nod. You go, okay, all right, maybe there's something to this writing business. I can keep doing it. I should say that as we're going along here, his sister, Rose, and he are very close, but she was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a young woman. And so this would be a huge factor in his life. And we'll follow that thread as we go along. But we can move into his education, his higher education. So we're in St. Louis into the end of the 20s, the early 30s. It's finally time for him to leave the madhouse of his home. His mother's upstairs shrieking because dad's drunk and horned up. Okay, great, time to leave. Crazy schizophrenic sister, unstable mother, and he goes to the University of Missouri in Columbia, and he enrolls in journalism classes. But he was bored with them. And apparently there was some unrequited love with a girl. Can't imagine why she wouldn't reciprocate. Strapping young lad that he is. But he's still submitting. He joins a fraternity. It doesn't go well. And then he fails military training in his junior year.
So what year would this be about?
Early 30s. So okay, 31.
Okay. So we're not World War II time, but...
We're not World War II time, yeah. And he wouldn't serve, which is something that isn't entirely clear to me, but I assume he fails training here, and then he was probably aged out by the time it happened, or he wasn't drafted. His proclivities may have also been a factor. So this is an important moment for Tennessee, because this is where I skipped over one thing. He saw a production at this university of Ibsen's Ghosts, which is a rather famous play of Ibsen's, and that really affected him. And so he has it in mind, I might be a playwright after seeing that. But his father pulls him from school in 31 because he fails military training. And what does his father do? This angry alcoholic shoe salesman manager father, what does he do? I'm not paying for your college. What do you think he makes him do?
I don't know. It's got to be some kind of like factory or work or something.
Yeah. You nailed it. Yep. You got to come to work at the shoe factory.
But wait, this doesn't even make any sense. So he fails military training, but he's going to college. So it's like,
look, I don't understand. Things were different, right? And
toughen him up, I guess. I don't know.
And here's the thing. One thing that we're going to encounter a lot on Art of Darkness, and we already have, is there's some of the figures that we're talking about have the spoon in their mouth, right? Burroughs definitely had the spoon in his mouth.
Who was living around there at the same time. So that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Your Cavan had the spoon in his mouth.
Yep.
Tennessee did not have the spoon in his mouth.
That's interesting.
And he came from a decent family here. You can tell in terms of money, but the nuclear family was out. They were clearly out of their minds. A schizophrenic sister that tends to run in the family. Not throwing shade on it, but there it is.
It's just there.
Unstable mother, and then he didn't go to Princeton. Right.
He went to University of Missouri.
So Dad pulls him and says, "You're going to work at the International Shoe Company factory, and you're a poet." And he would work all day boxing shoes, and he set a goal to write one story a week. His mother recounted that Tom would go to his room with black coffee and cigarettes, and I would hear the typewriter clicking away at night in the silent house. Some mornings when I walked in to wake him for work, I would find him sprawled, fully dressed on the bed, too tired to remove his clothes. So he's approaching his 24th birthday, college dropout, and not in the fun Kanye West. College dropout, working at his dad's factory. Talented, a budding genius. He has a nervous breakdown. And here we are.
At that time, you got to be worried that, maybe he has, if you have a nervous breakdown, it's not the same as schizophrenia, but that's the same age where it kicks in, right? So there's got to be some concern there.
Yep. It was his older sister who has schizophrenia, and you are ahead of it. He, for his entire life, feared that he would be that he would lose his mind like his sister. Even though he loved her a great deal, of course, he was afraid of it.
No, absolutely. I know a family that schizophrenia runs in, and a person I went to high school with, and the father has it, and one of the kids has it, and it's been a long time since I talked to anybody, but you can feel it lurking in the family. Like it's could it pop up? Because it can happen, it can happen, anytime in your 20s.
Well, you've just got to watch and wait and make sure none of them start the podcast.
That's right.
As soon as the podcast starts, then it's time. So by the mid-30s, Edwina and Cece Coffin have separated, and because of the alcoholism, they never divorce.
Well, she's not very religious, right?
Episcopalian and all of this. Well, so now we're in the mid-30s, and Tennessee, after a little hiatus from higher education, finally enrolls at Washington University. He wrote a play called Me Vasya, and he took fourth place in a competition, after which he proceeded to scream at his professor and stormed off campus.
Scream because he didn't win?
Because he didn't win. So he knows that he deserved first place, but the professors didn't agree. Right. So now we're two colleges down. He promptly transferred to Iowa, the University of Iowa, and he did finally take his bachelor's degree. And he worked on a collaborative play there, and he was quoted as saying, of the theater in that experience, the laughter enchanted me. Then and there, the theater and I found each other, for better and for worse. I know it's the only thing that saved my life. And this is where he adopted Tennessee Williams as his professional name.
Okay. I was kind of curious about that. So I'm just curious. So he was writing poetry and plays, and then poetry and stories, and then this was his first play.
Me Vasya, I believe, was his first.
So was it like plays, all plays from there out? I mean, we can get into that, I guess. But I'm curious
we will. I believe he wrote a novel, and he would write poetry. throughout his life, but principally known as a major American playwright.
Right.
Now, so there's so much I want to cover. This is I really enjoy doing this podcast because there's so many things that we can get into, and there's no way we're going to cover his entire career and all the people who supported him. Right. One of the weird little connections that I have is that there was a theater named after one of his early supporters, this Texas woman named Margot Jones, who boosted his career. He had a lot of help, particularly from women, throughout his career. And there are two books that I referenced for this podcast. I have the Wikipedia, I have some other links online, but I have two books. One is by this fellow named James Grissom, which is called Follies of God, Tennessee Williams and the Women of the Fog. And the title there comes from Tennessee, describing where his characters would come from. He had an internal theater in his mind, which was always covered in fog, almost kind of a David Lynch image, and a Lynchian type image. And he would summon these women, or these women would come to him. So Blanche would come to him as a character out of the fog, and he could hear their voices. I mean, he certainly was touched by genius, but not just the women of the fog, the actresses and the people who supported him. This is fun. We'll get to the story of James Grissom a little later. James Grissom wrote Tennessee after Tennessee was living back in New Orleans. I can't remember exactly what year, but later on in his life. And Grissom was a young, I presume gay man living in Baton Rouge who wanted to be a writer, wrote Tennessee, sent him a couple of short stories, and a picture from a beauty contest that he had won, because apparently he says when you see him in interviews, in the South back then, men would do beauty contests. It's like, I don't know why I sent Tennessee that picture. Well, it's like, well, yeah, I think you know why.
I think you know.
And 4 or 5 months later, his mother knocked on his door and said, "There's someone claiming to be Tennessee Williams who wants to speak to you," because he had sent Tennessee a letter asking for sort of advice about being a writer. And Tennessee, this is much later in Tennessee's life, Tennessee said, well, is this James Grissom? If you want to hear Tennessee's voice in your inner ear, you can kind of imagine Capote a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Some similarities in the sort of accent and the affect. But Tennessee called him and said, well, we're going to have lunch together, Oh, when? Well, today, I'm in New Orleans, and well, I'm in Baton Rouge, and to which Tennessee said, well, then you better hurry. And I love these stories of famous figures who can do that and get somebody on the road. The other book that I have is by a fellow named Lyle Leverich, and it's kind of the go-to biography of Tennessee Williams. Up to the premiere of the Glass Menagerie, which we're approaching here in this episode. And it's just called Tom, the Unknown Tennessee Williams. So those are the books that I'm referring to. So we're dealing right now. Oh, this is another point I wanted to make. So this is one of the things the Wikipedia kind of gets wrong. He definitely was influenced by other playwrights, right? I mean, you can make the case that Streetcar is very similar to the Cherry Orchard. If you know Chekhov and the Cherry Orchard, there are similarities. You lose it. It's an estate that's been lost or is in the process of being lost. There's all of this class tension.
Yeah, Cherry Orchard is kind of a Southern Gothic, isn't it? A little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
interesting.
He's definitely influenced by literary figures. His favorite writer, or one of his favorite writers, was Hart Crane. He really admired Hart Crane to the point where in some of the later interviews that he did, he claimed he wanted to be buried at sea like Hart Crane, which is pretty funny. I don't know much about Hart Crane other than that he was...
Me neither, but I know that getting an English degree. He was a name that was sort of at the periphery. It felt like all the time, but I never actually got into him either.
Yeah, well, this is a road we should go down. Yeah, Hart Crane, quite a big deal. Homosexual. I mean, I'm just reading. Would take a little aside here. Crane visited Mexico in 31-32 on a Guggenheim Fellowship, and his drinking continued as he suffered from bouts of alternating depression and elation. When Peggy Cowley, wife of his friend Malcolm Cowley, agreed to a divorce, she joined Crane. As far as is known, she was his only heterosexual partner. So another future episode of Art of Darkness.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, we just find an author and type in the word alcohol. And you've got a subject.
That's right.
So we're arriving to Tennessee becoming Tennessee. And I think now would be a good point for me to read a quote from him as we move toward the 40s. Let me find one of the quotes. Yes. So this is quite good. Nobody sees anybody truly, but all through the flaws of their own egos. That is the way we all see each other in life. Vanity, fear, desire, competition, all such distortions within our own egos condition our vision of those in relation to us. And to those distortions to our own egos, the corresponding distortions in the egos of others. And you see how, add to those distortions to our own egos, the corresponding distortions in the egos of others, and you see how cloudy the glass must become through which we look at each other. That's how it is in all living relationships, except when there is that rare case of two people who love intensely enough to burn through all those layers of opacity and see each other's naked hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you have in Tennessee, you have a pretty keen observer of the human scene.
Yeah, and then deep psychological understanding, and also a little bit, also a kind of romantic idealist, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I would say. Well, so we're in the late 30s. He's working some menial jobs. He was a caretaker at a chicken ranch in Laguna Beach, California. At some point, a little interlude there.
Interesting. Yeah.
Audrey Wood picks him up as a client, and she's this major mid-century agent. He was awarded a $1,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. He wrote a play called Battle of Angels. It was his early work, Juvenilia, that was produced in Boston in 1940. It wasn't well received, but hey, keep trying. Sure. And he took the money from the Rockefeller Fund, and he did what every respectable young man from a good legacy family in the South does. He moved to New Orleans.
Okay. Yeah.
And he moved in 1939. Apparently, he went to write for the Works Progress Administration, the federal program that Roosevelt began. And he went to live in the French Quarter. And so now Tennessee has arrived at the place where he's exploring the darker side of life, let's say, in terms of drugs and partying, and then he also discovers his sexuality, which is decidedly gay. Yeah. One of the interviews we're going to listen to later, he was always kind of out. He never really hid it. Like his family knew, everybody kind of knew, but you didn't really talk about it. Yeah. But on one of these talk shows, he was drunk, and the host was kind of pressing him and giving him a bit of a working over. Yeah. And Tennessee kind of smirks and says, "But I've covered the waterfront." And it's a pretty great moment. So nice. I wanted to actually get to something from one of the books from that period. So let me find what I was looking for. I should say, as I'm looking for that, just how you owe it to yourself. If you haven't seen these movies, particularly Streetcar, but also Cat, they're just essential. And there's no greater film than Streetcar.
No, not really.
It's incredible.
Yeah, you don't get much better. You just get different.
That's for real. Exactly. So he's in New Orleans in the early 40s, and with a little bit of money, but not a lot of money. And so this is an interesting. So this is Saturday, October 11th, I think 41, and he writes, one of those queer lost mornings. Love life resumed with a vengeance last night. 2 in the night, 1 in the morning. Enjoyed it the first couple, then a bit sordid. Ah, well, I guess it comes under the heading of fair entertainment. The Blue Devils have sort of squatted dumbly at the foot of the stairs, as it were. Love is what makes it still seem nice after the orgasm. Then is when sex becomes art, after the orgasm. One must be an artist to keep it from falling to pieces uglily. Up to then, it is simply craftsmanship, and of a pretty crude and simple kind. It is also art, of course, when you first meet the person, selecting the attitude and sticking to it. So he's in poverty down here. So having gone from check to check, now it's hand to mouth, and he's really living. This is not a LARP. This is a fellow who's fairly estranged from his father.
Right.
I don't think
he's not getting a trust fund check. Right. He's not getting. Yeah, his dad's not putting a deposit down on his apartment.
Yeah. The stuff that he writes about, the sort of the business in Streetcar is lived. He didn't go down there as a joke.
Right.
So this is a little bit more here. He's saying difficulties financial, Blue Devils dispersed. I am flat broke, stony, literally not 1 cent. Bummed a couple of cigarettes off a Queen at Jeans. Guess I'll have to sell a suit tomorrow. Hate to, but I do love to eat, and one must have beer money on Saturday night in the quarter. Rent overdue 3 or 4 days. The Lawrence play goes nicely. I think, well, let's hope a gift arrives in the mail. Oh, and then he would sign his letters en avant, looking
en
forward.
Avant?
En avant, the French.
What does that mean?
Looking forward.
Oh, okay.
I believe,
right.
In front, something like that.
Okay.
So, I'm not done with this period. I just love this stuff.
Yeah.
Saturday, I wake up with no money for breakfast and the landlady right outside my door. Oh, no. Midnight. Bill loaned me $5. God bless him. I still have my good suit. Had a pretty satisfactory, quote, roll in the hay this evening. Then a long, dull round of the gay places to kill time. I have nothing to say to these people after I've been to bed with one of them. Then it all seems utterly vacuous. I prefer to just sit and look at Bill and say nothing. I think Bill must have been one of his lovers. Now, this is where it gets a little rough down in the Big Easy.
Okay.
Come Sunday morning, he discovered, I have crabs again and can't even afford to buy the personal insecticide.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Literally a lousy writer. That's me, a lousy guy. Want excitement? Move? Florida? No. Taos? Wish I could. New York? Maybe soon, but I am probably better off here, relatively speaking. I'm satisfied and the life is relatively pleasant. And there is Bill, maybe the nicest guy I've ever known. Moscow is being sieged. A footnote to all this trivial chatter. Typical bitch, Tennessee. Almost 10. Now, here's the problem.
I love the staccato style of this. Like it's got like a little bit of like jazz almost to it. Yeah.
Well, so then what ends up happening here is that, well, here we go. I'll read it. Monday, very, very blue. A charming little incident climaxed an already miserable evening. So you can see he has this sort of queenie sense of drama, doesn't he? The lover of Saturday night stopped me and said, "Say, do you know you have crabs? You gave them to me." Oh, no. Yeah. So we're dealing with, listen to this. Later, drank a pitcher of water to relieve my hunger. Found a few grapes left in bottom of sack. 2 were eatable. When hunger drives a man to a crime, it should not be considered a crime except against the man who committed it. Later, can't sleep, empty stomach, and quote unquote crabs.
Oh.
So he had his Bukowski moment.
Yeah, definitely.
He was at the bottom.
Wow.
For sure. So we're in the 40s, and he's in New Orleans. He has a little bit of money. He has the agent, and he does finally get the call to Hollywood. And that the timing here gets a little bit muddy. I'm trying to get it exact because I want to get it right. Yeah, go ahead.
This is based on, so he'd had a handful of plays, one or more plays produced when he was living in New Orleans.
No, this is a dry period.
Oh, I see.
This is dry. So he's writing. He's working on setting up his plays.
Yeah. Okay.
So he has Audrey Wood in his corner, and here it is. So he finally gets from the Rockefeller grant, which is how it often is, right? Mm-hmm. Gets him enough attention from Hollywood that Audrey Wood gets him a 6-month contract at MGM.
Oh, okay, nice.
All right. Yeah. So he gets the call. He goes out to Hollywood, and there's all of this funny little these letters from him where he's saying how wonderful money is, and there are, and he was very handsome in his way, right?
Oh, was he? Okay.
There are pictures of him, in Santa Monica on the beach, golden tan, just living large.
Nice.
Just writing for the industry, getting his bank account filled up, and who can blame him? So he's out in Hollywood doing that, and that's where he writes the short story that would eventually become the Glass Menagerie. Now, this is a really, really important period for him. The short story, I believe, was called The Gentleman Caller. MGM didn't want it, but eventually it would be made into a play, but not before he would return to New York City to pursue the theater, leaving Hollywood behind. So he had his contract. He did what he had to do in Hollywood. He got his tan, and then he got
a little bit of scratch.
Got some scratch together, then moved to New York City. Now, if we were writing this as a biopic, this would be the first Dark Night of the Soul. We're approaching bottom here for Tennessee before the breakout. And so I want to read again from the Tom book about his period in New York City in 42, 43. So we have the war in the background. This is a struggling Southern playwright in New York City. Sure, he has an agent. He's had a show on, but he hasn't had a hit by any means. He's writing poetry, and also Tennessee Williams was a sex addict.
Right.
This is my contribution to the understanding. Now, you say sex addict. He was a very busy little boy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing you said 3 within a 24-hour period. That's a lot.
Yeah, he covered the waterfront, as he said himself.
Yeah.
And more power to him. But this is, again, when all of the biographies and all the polite society and the academic stuff will just sort of skirt around this. I'm like, no, this guy was out there. He was randy. So it's the middle of January in New York City, and he was still cruising like mad when once again he ran afoul of what is called rough trade. Late Thursday night, this is his letter or something he wrote, his diary. Probably the most shocking experience I've ever had with another human being was last night when my trade turned dirt. No physical violence resulted. I was insulted, threatened, bullied, and robbed of about $1.50 and a cigarette lighter. All my papers were rooted through, and the pitiless, horrifying intimidation was carried on for about an hour. I was powerless. I could not ask for help. There was only me and him, a big guy. Well, I kept my head, and I did not get panicky at any moment or at any point, though I expected certainly to be beaten. I didn't even tremble. I talked gently and reasonably in answer to all the horrible abuse. Somehow the very helplessness and apparent hopelessness of the situation prevented much fright. I stayed in the room while he was threatening and searching because my manuscripts were there, and I feared he might try to confiscate or destroy them. In that event, I would have fought, called for help, anything. He finally despaired of finding any portable property of value and left with the threat that any time he saw me, he would kill me. I felt sick and disgusted. I think that is the end of my traffic with such characters. Oh, and I want to get away from here and lead a clean, simple, antiseptic life. Taos, the desert, and the mountains.
Oof.
So
yeah,
you can see where his experience in the factory back in St. Louis, and a character there who is Kowalski type, his Stanley Kowalski working man type. Yeah. And then these experiences of violence in New York City. You can see how this is all twirling around in his genius brain. Mm-hmm. And this is the year that his sister, Rose, she had already been institutionalized, but her condition was worsening. To the degree where she had to get a lobotomy. So they did a prefrontal, whatever it is, a lobotomy. I want to make sure I get it right. So
have you ever heard of the stories of the guy who sort of invented and popularized lobotomy?
Mr. Lobot?
Lobot? Yeah,
no, I
Lobot.
Don't. We should do an episode about him.
Well, you check out. There's a great episode. Oh, what is that podcast? Anyway, you can find out a lot of information. He was the creepiest, weirdest person, and I struggle to understand that people even bought what he was selling. Honestly.
Look, Brad, you just have to trust the science.
Trust the science.
Trust the science.
All you got to do, we just go in there, we cut your brain in half, and you're fine after that.
Yeah.
No,
and you're not going to disturb anybody anymore.
Yeah,
we'll just put you back in the room.
It was performed on a lot of recalcitrant housewives at first.
Fun. Yeah, we love that. Trust the science, everyone. So great. Well, this affected Tom, Tennessee.
Sure.
Quite a great deal. And he wrote a poem about it, which I'm going to find.
About her being lobotomized?
About her lobotomy. So he's in New York City being mugged by rough trade.
Yeah. Poor,
having his
mugged.
and having his papers dug through. And let me find it. So yeah, right. Although once again without funds, Tom did stay on and was startled by a letter dated January 20th from home, from Edwina. Now that it's over, she wrote, I can tell you about Rose. So they write him after it's happened, who has successfully come through a head operation. A letter from Dr. Hochter and the surgeon said yesterday that she shows marked improvement and has cooperated through it all. I shall be permitted to visit her Sunday. And then he wrote back, I did not at all understand the news about Rose. What kind of operation was it and what was it for? Finally, he asked, please let me know exactly what was done with Rose. So it was a bilateral prefrontal lobotomy had been performed. Yeah. Pretty difficult. So he wrote a poem. Tom's only reference to the news about his sister was set down in another journal, a spiral notebook. Grand God be with you, a cord breaking 1,000 miles away, Rose, her head cut open, a knife thrust in her brain, me here smoking, my father mean as a devil, snoring 1,000 miles away.
Huh.
So,
jeez,
not a good time.
No.
So he's in New York City. He's trying to get going in the theater. It is worth saying. He did finally see her. I think he saw her that year, and he did write. And I don't know how much of this was cope, but he wrote, "We drove out to see my sister yesterday and found the operation because I believe she was moved to upstate New York. I think that's what happened. Yeah, and he would once he came into money, which is coming. He looked after her and cared for her his entire life.
Yeah."
We drove out to see my sister yesterday and found the operation on the brain had accomplished something quite amazing. The madness is still present, that is, certain of the delusions, but they have now become entirely consistent and coherent. So the lobotomy makes your madness coherent.
Right. I'm not even sure if that's better.
Yeah, right. She is full of vitality, and her perceptions and responses seemed almost more than normally acute. All of her old wit and mischief was in evidence, and she was having great fun at the expense of the nurses and inmates. She told me they were mentally lazy, interested only in menial accomplishments. She herself is reading 19th century history and is particularly fascinated by Victor Hugo. Before the operation, she was unable to read at all and was interested in nothing. So, right.
I hope that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, he would go on to say that, to me, mental therapy is the most intriguing work. And if I could make a fresh start, I'd take that up instead of writing, which is funny because his work has all of the qualities of psychology and these deep characters. When, the name of the playwright now escapes me. I'll have to look it up. But when Streetcar premiered, a very famous playwright came to him. It might have been Horton Foote. Came to him and said, Blanche is too complex a character for the theater. To which Tennessee said, but people are complex,
right?
You know? Yeah.
Too complex for the theater.
Thornton Wilder. It was Thornton Wilder who said that to him, I think. You know how these things are. You start gathering all of these little little
you
moments,
got the pieces, but
but it was so interesting. So I mean, his sister's had a lobotomy. He's suffered as much as really anybody's going to suffer. He's gone through a lot. The troubled home, the homosexuality in a time where, of course, that puts you at odds with all of mainstream society, all of society.
Untreatable case of crabs.
Yes, right. Which he shared. He's been mugged by his fellow by somebody. So just not good. But it's finally time to develop the Glass Menagerie. And this comes from, and I got the title wrong earlier, the 1943 short story Portrait of a Girl in Glass.
Oh, okay.
And do you know the Glass Menagerie?
I don't. Oh, I mean that name is it's such a strong title. But yeah, I don't know anything about it.
You should know it. It's his first major play. It's the thing that put him on the map, and there's a very fine film version of it. And there's actually a more modern film version of it. I think it was made in the 80s with John Malkovich. And it's highly biographical. It's about an aging Southern belle whose husband has abandoned her, and she's trying to marry off her daughter, who is somehow crippled. And it's about and then there's a character called Tom, who has to work at a terrible factory. And it's about, so it's highly autobiographical. And it premiered in Chicago. And now we're finally on the map. And I'm going to go back to the Tom book to sort of describe what happened when he had his success in Chicago with this play. You really should see the film version of it. It's worth seeing.
I would check that out.
Yeah, let me find. Yeah, it's really worth it. It's the first of kind of like of his stuff. I would say watch Menagerie, watch Streetcar, and watch Cat, and you're probably in good shape. I'll talk about some of the other ones because I think they're interesting.
Yeah.
At the end, so this is about the opening night in Chicago. Oh wait, no, that's not. I'm getting out of turn here. I'll come back to that one second. So we're in Chicago, and I think this is quite funny. I'm not finding it, but that's fine. I'll ad lib it. He's starting to succeed in Chicago with the play. He has a hit in Chicago, which is not a hit in New York City, right? No. You need the New York City success, but it starts to become a problem because now everybody wants a piece of him and everybody wants to sleep with him.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and so
to have.
Well, so I'm trying to take us on this voyage from the guy who's getting mugged. Here it is. I found the passage. As the author of a hit play, Tom had found a remedy for ready sex that also worked mighty quick. Suddenly, he was being approached by opportunists whose interest in sex often included a desire for other favors that only influence and a surfeit of cash could provide. Tom enjoyed casual, often anonymous sex, and if money was a condition, that was fine with him. particularly if the other party needed to be paid as an excuse for doing what comes unnaturally to the hustler. While he didn't object to paying for a one-night stand, from this point on, Tom would be darkly suspicious in trying to distinguish between an extended hand of friendship and a sweaty palm. So he talked about, from here on out, from the New York moment that's coming, the catastrophe of success. So this is again not somebody who comes from kind of easy money, high living. This is somebody who came from not the gutter, but he visited the gutter.
Yeah. Well, we saw this in the Rod Serling episode too, right? Sort of middle class guy comes into all this money and success, and half of his work is about how success is, an albatross around your neck,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And by the time Tennessee writes Cat, he is interrogating alcoholism, obviously.
Right.
And that comes from his own. One of the psychological theories about Tennessee is that his sister's lobotomy and her institutionalization really affected him and was key to his kind of descent. And then finally, as his career started to wane, coupled with
there's a way that if it's someone you care about, and hopefully her lobotomy had this effect and she was reasonably happy or whatever, but there's a way that if they're deeply mentally suffering, that's almost worse than them dying. There's no way out. They can't enjoy life. They're kind of gone. Well, and that's what the Glass Menagerie is about, is this pain of this youth fading away into this endless repetition of a loveless life, of a life without passion, and the kind of hopelessness of that. That's a theme in Streetcar too. What is left for Blanche at the end of Streetcar but the madhouse? Right.
And that's the ending of that play after Stanley rapes her,
right?
Which was something that was removed from the film, but very, very heavily suggested. Yeah. But in this case, we're still with Tom, Tennessee, and they take Menagerie to New York, and I'm going to read about what happened. In the final tableau of the play, with Tom departed, Amanda hovers protectively over a broken, deeply dispirited Laura, symbolizing what Tennessee Williams saw in his own mother. Now that we cannot hear the mother's speech, her silliness is gone, and she has dignity and tragic beauty. At the end, the audience roared its approval. There were 24 curtain calls.
Whoa.
As Lorette took her bows, tears streaked down her cheeks, and she smiled somewhat tentatively while she held out the pleated frills of her worn blue party dress and curtsied. Her daughter said that she had the look of a great ruin of a child gazing timorously upon the world she found to be infinitely pleasing. At length, there were shouts of "Author, author." Eddie Dowling came down to the edge of the stage, and beckoned Tom to come forward and take his place with the company. The young man, who rose from the fourth row, his hair in a crew cut, his suit button missing, looked more like a junior in college than an eminent playwright. Standing in the aisle, he turned toward the stage and made a deep bow to the actors, his posterior in full view of the audience. And that's the moment he became Tennessee Williams.
That's cool, man. Yeah.
Bowing to the actors is quite
that's
good.
Cool.
Yeah. There was another little bit about his parents that I wanted to get to before we kind of move into the middle act of his life, because we have to get to Streetcar before we listen to the first clip of him, because the first clip of him is him coming back from Europe, and he's on a boat, and he's like, I was in Italy, and
he's a cocksure man at this point.
Well,
right?
I mean, he's definitely. I mean, we are talking Elvis levels of fame here.
Oh yeah, no, he was. He was extremely highest levels of success, right?
Yes,
basically.
By the time
for a writer,
yeah. Well, so let me find this. This is coming later. I want to find this. This is from the James Grissom, the great James Grissom book about Tennessee, and this is about his parents. This is Tennessee talking about his father. whose respect he finally did earn, I should say. In one of the interviews, the moment his father kind of grudgingly gave him respect was when they had to add a seat on the aisle for him.
Nice.
Because that's a good feeling, man.
Yeah.
You get, all right, Dad, how do you like me now?
Yeah.
But here's what Tennessee said. And one day he was gone, Ten said, and I hated him for that too. I hated him for hitting me and hating me and forcing me to become something other than what I was. But I came in time to see that he was absolutely my father, just as only Edwina could be my mother. I am their son in every way, and my father is the dreamer, the inconsistent, impossible, wandering poet that I have become. I dream as my mother did, but my mother had no movement in her. There was no advancement within her. Her dreams were internal and suppressed by rage, fueled by denial. My father, however, took action, and his dreams were in his feet, and he moved away from a situation he could no longer handle. I took my thoughts and my dreams and put them into words that made their way to paper, and he took to the streets. He got away. He navigated in the truest sense of the word, and I came in my way to understand him and love him.
God, he saw people, man.
Oh,
yeah, he's got a profound insight into people.
He understood people, and if you watch nothing but Streetcar, the nuance and the elegance of the characters in terms of their construction and what motivates them. Every scene is this completely taut and incredible scene. This is a good point for me to read something else from the Follies book because, there's an interview or I think there was like a London production of it that Jessica Lange was in with Christian Slater and some other
recently,
John C. Reilly, and they're talking about what it's like to be in it, and they're talking about the metaphor. I think it was Jessica Lange who was talking about the metaphor of Streetcar, about what it's like to play it, and it has the feeling of you are getting on a streetcar. It is going one place and only one place, and it gets there every night, right?
Right.
But here's something he wrote. I have always felt as if I traveled through life on one train, while on an alternate track, an alternate train of my own creation moved along with me. This alternate train followed me through my life and still does, but it is populated with those people I might wish to know or to be, and it stops at those destinations I might have preferred over the itinerary fate and folly have dealt me. So many of the women I have known and admired and feared and ridiculed have had similar travel arrangements. I used to think, as I held on to my strap on the train I did not choose, that if I hoped enough, dreamed enough, I might make the move to that other train. In living my life in this foolish way, I came to realize that every encounter in my life, and therefore in my plays, had at its core a feverish desire, a longing, perhaps a futile one, almost always a futile one, as I think on it. But I came to see that this desire is nothing more than prayer, true prayer. When I fell to the depths and sought help from the religious, they sought to teach me the art of prayer, and I dutifully followed along, eager to learn and to be saved. Then I saw that what they most envied, most desired, was that energetic and stupidly hopeful desire I had manifested, eyes closed, on that damn train of mine. He would, at some juncture here, down in Key West, be baptized Catholic, but he sort of claimed never to take it too seriously.
Man, half the people we do on this show end up being Catholics.
Yeah, so, man. Why don't you? I went to mass today. Why don't all y'all just cut to the chase?
That's
yeah, right. So well, so I want to get to Streetcar. To say it's iconic is an understatement.
So when Menagerie is a success as a play,
yes.
When does it come out as a film? It was a success in a play at 45, I think you said, as a play.
Yeah, he was. It was 47.
47. Okay.
Yeah. 44 rather. I take it back.
Okay.
And that won the Critics Circle Award. Didn't win the Pulitzer.
Wait, it did or
it did not?
Oh,
it didn't. But Streetcar eventually would.
Yeah.
I want to see when the film version came out because I want to.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of curious because that seems like that would be kind of when he enters pop culture consciousness a little bit.
I wonder the reason I want to get it right is that it was that came out in 1950.
Okay.
Menagerie was a 1944 play that premiered on Broadway. It's important we get these dates right, but it all starts to happen like hot and fast right now.
Nice.
Premiered in Chicago in 1944, Drama Critics Circle Award in 1945, Broadway 1945.
Nice.
Now we're getting on to Streetcar, which I want to get to, but it's important we don't. Right. So the film for Streetcar came out a year after Menagerie, so it came out in 1951. Premiered on Broadway in 1947. It's at this point that Tennessee meets his kind of one lover. So let me make sure that I get this right. So, because their meeting is quite funny. So Frank Merlo, who's a Navy veteran, right? Again, I'm covering the waterfront here, Tennessee.
Maybe that's that might be show title unless we run into something.
In the Navy,
covering the waterfront.
Yeah, covering the waterfront. Yeah. There's actually a title, and I don't like to come preconceived to this, but I'll come to it later. But covering the waterfront with Tennessee Williams is a good one. Well, so they met in Provincetown, Massachusetts in 1947, and they spent a night together on the beach, making love. And
it's very romantic.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah. You get a little sand in your craw there. Yeah. Well, so he comes back to New York. Streetcar premieres, is a sensation, makes Brando a star, and wins him the Pulitzer Prize. And in early autumn, and I love this story, of 1948, Tennessee accidentally runs into Merlo, who's an actor, by the way, in New York City, like in a deli, and then by October, they've moved in together.
Nice. Nice.
And so, he had a string of homosexual relationships prior to this. And I mean relationships, not random hookups. Okay. But he really fell in love with Frank. And Merlo helped to begin to wean him off drugs and casual sex. Yeah.
So what was it? Later on, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, so let's see here. Well, you know what? This is a good point to listen to the first clip that I want to share with you, Brad.
Yeah,
this is Tennessee after he comes back from Europe. He's being interviewed on a cruise ship, and he has the world by the short hairs.
Nice.
Point. So I'm going to send it to you in the chat.
Okay, yeah.
All right. We're just in time right now to catch Tennessee Williams, the very well-known American playwright. Hi, Tennessee. Wonder if I could chat a little bit with you. I don't know too much about this current trip, but usually you're going to Italy, and you seem to like that area over there for writing. Is this going to be a writing trip?
Yes, I expect to combine writing with traveling this time, as usual.
I remember the last time we talked to you, Tennessee, you were over there to try and get that fabulous Italian star. Let's see.
Anna Magnani.
Anna Magnani, that's right. To come to New York and do Rose Tattoo.
Yes, well, I didn't succeed in getting her.
I bet she's doggone sorry now because Rose Tattoo had a nice run, and, it's been a well-received play. It's probably going to tour all over the United States, eventually be made into a movie. Do you have any plans along those lines?
Yes, well, eventually there will be a film. Right now I'm interested chiefly in getting and lining up European productions for it. We have contracts for productions in Scandinavia and Denmark, Norway and Sweden, and there's a production plan for England and for Italy.
Almost every one of your plays has been internationally accepted. That is, it's played, in Europe and the States, and has done reasonably equally well in both places.
Yes, that's true.
Is there any special reason for that in the writing of them? I mean, when you originally write them, do you slant them that way?
Well, there's a tremendous interest now in American drama. I think the war put a crimp on the European theater, and right now it's being fed predominantly, that is outside of England, it's being fed predominantly by American theater. Of course, it's going to revive again as soon as social conditions over there become more settled, I think.
So you don't come from Tennessee, do you?
No, I come from Mississippi.
Mississippi? Well,
yeah.
How'd they put that handle on you of Tennessee?
I put it on myself.
That was your own idea.
It was my own idea because my father's family were Tennesseans, yes.
When you start to write a play, what do you sort of get to first? The general story outline, or the characters involved, or the setting? What do you look for first?
I'm always a little confused with that question because I don't quite remember. Usually my long plays grow out of short plays, and usually the short plays grow out of short stories.
In other words, then the ideas
yeah,
probably come first, the characters second, locale third.
I'm not sure whether it's the character that comes first. Certainly it's the character that's most important to me, more important to me than the story.
I find it very difficult to write in a place like New York City as compared to, say, the leisure of Lake Como or Lake Maggiore or a place like that.
Yes, I find New York the most difficult place to work. Certainly any place where you have more leisure, like Rome or Lake Como, as you mentioned, or the mountains of Austria are much better for writing.
Bob Sherwood once told me that the proximity of the telephone was his greatest problem in writing.
I find that to be, yes, because I can't resist answering it.
And the friends keep calling. Yeah. Tennessee, thanks an awful lot for chatting with us. It's certainly nice to meet you again. We seem to have you quite a bit on the ships, but then being a writer, you have to be a veteran traveler. Have a good trip this time. Right, bye. And so, friends, we come to the end of your Ship's Reporter program for today. Ship's Reporter is produced on film by the National Television Guild and directed by Chick Vincent. Until next time, then, this is Jack Mangan, your Ship's Reporter, wishing you and yours the smoothest and smooth sailing.
Wishing you the smoothest of smooth sailing.
That's right.
When men wore hats.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That was a very 50s kind of vibe to it for sure. But there was a couple notes in there that I quite liked. I mean, one is, I guess I didn't know what Tennessee Williams looked like. I saw in tweeting ahead of this, I sent out a couple Dick Cavett interviews.
Yep.
And that's much later. That's like 15 years after this or 20 years after this. And yeah, I guess I didn't know what he looked like, and I was sort of surprised by it, but I don't know what I expected him to look like. Yeah, he's got that great wit. He's got that great Southern pace.
And that is what a Southern accent sounds like.
Yes.
A real one.
Yeah.
Genteel,
yeah, absolutely.
nice and soft. Not going to try to fake it.
Right.
Nice twang.
Yeah, in America, we have this weird bias against, I feel like there's this strange bias against the Southern accent. And I think there's some people who think of it as sort of stupid or something like that. But I've always thought it seems to come with this, like, what's the term? Savoir-faire, like knowing what to say, wit, like, having a sort of sly remark in response to everything. Like, how did they put that handle on you of Tennessee? Well, I put it on myself.
Yeah, a little bon mot, a little nice little dig, and everything's layered in 3 or 4 levels of meaning at all moments.
Right.
Which is perfect for the playwright, because that's exactly what you want from your play. You don't want to know quite which way. It's called a play for a reason, right?
Right.
Yeah, conversation should feel a little bit like a sword fight, but in a fun way. Nobody's going to get an eye poked out, but we're having fun here. A little winking kind of nod to the camera.
That was great.
Yeah, well, so that's a great moment to just talk about Tennessee on the top of the world. I'm king of the world, from being mugged in his squalorous New York tenement flat.
What's funny is when the interviewer said something about, like, all of your plays have international appeal, I noticed, and maybe I was just reading too much into it because now I'm like in on his story, but I noticed there was like a moment in Tennessee's eyes that were like, oh, they haven't all been international. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you don't know.
Oh,
about
you don't know about the
came
stinkers
before.
and the duds and the for sure.
Rejection.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. It's so true. I mean, and I don't know exactly how many plays he wrote, but it was into the dozens. And of course, you only know the name of 3 or 4.
Right.
And if you can write 2 plays, 1 play on the level of Streetcar, you've made more of a dent in this world than most people ever will.
Most of the tech bros in Silicon Valley.
And that's where the transmission cut out. I think now would be a good moment for another quote. He wrote this in the Paris Review, I assume an interview. When I write, I don't aim to shock people, and I'm surprised when I do, but I don't think that anything that occurs in life should be omitted from art, though the artist should present it in a fashion that is artistic and not ugly. I set out to tell the truth, and sometimes the truth is shocking.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a wisdom to that, because if you really just tell Streetcar beat by beat, the plot of Streetcar, you can summarize it in a really blunt way. And it's a very rapey play, frankly, to use an ugly term. And there really isn't too much redeeming in it in terms of literally this is what the animals in the zoo did that day.
Right.
And this is what I mean. The contrast of his heightened poetic language to the raw, guttural truth of what the theater of what physical life is.
Right.
And that's one thing. And as a modest playwright myself, like that's one thing that theater really excels at, is you have this, at least in the West, we have this rich, well, as humans, we have this rich literary tradition that we can draw on, and our language is so sophisticated, but then you dump it into flesh on stage, and that contrast is immediate, and it comes across.
Right.
And it really, in terms of play to film adaptations, there's really nothing better than Streetcar, and then the next big play for him, which was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Sure.
Well, how would you describe Cat on a Hot Tin Roof to people, Brad? I just watched it again.
Oh, well, so as a child of the 80s, watching Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, I believe I saw it. I might have seen it when I was going to the University of Texas and I was taking a film class. But
Paul Newman, right?
Yeah, Paul Newman is great in it. But that was the film I watched, and that was when I realized my entire life Elizabeth Taylor had been famous, but she had been old famous, and it wasn't clear why is this old weird woman who marries a bunch of people, why is she famous? Then I saw Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and I was like, oh, that's why Elizabeth Taylor's famous, because she was gorgeous and she was an extremely talented actress, and I mean it has the great it's almost like and this isn't meant to be demeaning or derogatory to the work whatsoever, but it's almost like a Southern Gothic light a little bit. But it is about sort of like the dynamics of sort of intergenerational wealth, faded glory, alcoholism, beauty, and the way that like a loving relationship, love ages that and goes through its changes, and it's just a beautifully done film. And Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor, who I hadn't realized was the phenomenon that she was, and Paul Newman, who's as good as anybody who ever did it. It's a great film.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
I think now is a good time for me to talk about my personal story around Tennessee.
Yeah.
So, of course, we were at Texas together, and his collection is at the Harry Ransom Center.
Oh, it is. Okay.
His estate was left to Sewanee in Tennessee, which is an Episcopal university in Tennessee, and they fund a writers program. And I actually had I had a Tennessee Williams scholarship at one point. $1,000 of Tennessee's money. Cool. I like to joke it was $1,000 of somebody yelling "Stella," right into my pocket. Yeah, Stella. But we were at Texas, and there was an amazing exhibition of Tennessee miscellany at the Harry Ransom Center, which is this great archival library in at UT Austin.
Oh yeah, and for let's do a Harry Ransom aside for like 30 seconds.
Sure.
If you live in Austin, Texas, which tons of people do nowadays, you do not have to be a University of Texas student to go there. You can just go there. You have to go through like a 20-minute orientation, so they teach you how to handle the materials, and it is the largest and most profound literary archive in the United States, and maybe the world, actually.
It is a major archive. Like Crowley's tarot deck is there.
Right.
Mammoth's collection is there.
Yeah, I read William Faulkner's letters there. I read all kinds of background production when they were trying to turn Hemingway's "It's Not the Sun Also Rises"
For Whom the Bell Tolls,
when they were turning it into a film, because there's also a substantial film archive associated with the Harry Ransom. It's like, for a person who is interested in literature and film, it's kind of a religious experience.
It's a mecca. You really can't believe it. It's a very special place.
And you can put your hands on this stuff. You write down on a list, I want to see this, and then 5 minutes later somebody comes and they hand you William Faulkner's handwritten letters. It's unbelievable.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, so we were there in my first year of graduate school. We were writing short plays that were sort of inspired by Tennessee Williams and by his miscellany. One of the fun objects that was there under glass was Marlon Brando's Little Black Book from the period of Streetcar. Because Brando was a total playboy. And it was just a black book full of telephone numbers of different people, many lovers, would-be lovers, etc. And apparently the stage manager didn't get on with Brando. And so he lost the book. And the story we were told is that the stage manager found it but never returned it. And it was I found your iPhone, but you're hosed now, buddy. You should have been nicer. But this is a very personal story. But I was at the Harry Ransom Center working on a play by Tennessee Williams, working on something like a short play inspired by the Glass Menagerie, when the sheriff called to tell me my own mother had passed away. So I was sitting as a playwright surrounded by this, and I'm not trying to make this about me. Surrounded by all of this material of this haunted playwright. So I'll always associate that personal moment with, and there's some strange synchronicity about it. And I was reminded of it because we're moving into the sort of the latter act of Tennessee's life. I'm going to kind of blast through sort of here toward the end. We'll listen to another clip of his, but there's his mother would pass away. I think she died in 1980. I'm kind of jumping around here for the sake of the story, but
wait, 1980? She made it in 1980?
Yeah, she lived to be 95. But this fellow James Grissom, whose book is worth checking out, talked about after his mother passed away how much he loved his mother and how much he missed his mother. There's a Southern saying, which I didn't know, but Tennessee would be unhappy after his mother passed away. And he would say, I've got mama bones. And when you have mama bones, it means your mother's passed away, or you miss your mother so much that the smell of a perfume or of a flower or something that reminds you of her hurts you all the way down to your bones, and you got mama bones.
Wow.
So I had mama bones there for a while, man.
But no, there's something poignant and beautiful about, you've dedicated, if not your life, a lot of energy and your soul and your efforts and your passion into writing plays, and to be there amongst the objects that he had touched and infused to have that's
it's a hell of a moment.
Cool.
I think, Again, it was just a little bit of a personal aside.
Beautiful.
But I'll always have that, man. I mean, it's pretty wild. I mean, life throws you sort of weird moments like that.
Yeah, if you're a writer, you catch them.
For sure. Well, so we're still in his heyday, and we're just going to blast through it. So he writes some plays between Streetcar. Then he writes Summer and Smoke, which is another successful play. Writes a play called The Rose Tattoo, which was originally written for the Italian actress, whom I think he mentioned in the...
Yeah, he does mention her in there.
Yeah, and she refused it. She refused to do it on Broadway because her English wasn't good enough. But by the time it was time to make a movie out of it, she was willing to be in the film version. But these film versions, like the Rose Tattoo, it is baffling because you watch Streetcar and it's so iconic and it's just burnt into your mind. And then you watch the Rose Tattoo and you go, what even is this? And this is I think, is that the one? Is it Rose Tattoo? I think the Rose Tattoo might be the one where they end up in a strip club and it's like all of 30 seconds and you see legs and you go. So clearly at one point he was the film content that was produced on Tennessee Williams' back is uneven. I'm just going to say that.
So do you think something got lost? Something got lost by Tennessee in writing it. Something got lost in between the play and the
my
film.
impression is that something got lost between the play and the film. I mean, film it's such a different animal.
It really is. Yeah.
And Cat on the Hot Tin Roof as a film is so incredible. There's another one that he wrote called Baby Doll. And the plot of Baby Doll, it's the only thing. Yeah, right. It's the only thing that you would it's the only screenplay that he wrote specifically to be a screenplay. Okay. And if I give you the plot, it sounds like it could just be this like barn burning, sexy, dangerous play. And this is a theme that comes up again and again is older characters. He'd be perfect for the Twitter age gap discourse right now. Yeah. Because it's older characters who have these forbidden, impossible affairs with younger characters. I mean, Blanche sleeps with a 17-year-old student. Blanche is like a character out of The Corrections.
Franzen.
I mean, Blanche is a teacher who diddles one of her students.
Wow.
I mean that tends to be forgotten. There's all these great lines, but it's like that's her backstory. She was run out of town like a witch, right, for seducing a teenager. Yeah. Baby Doll, the plot is there are two rival gin mill owners, and the one gin mill owner burns down the other gin mill owner's gin mill in order to drum up business. I'm gonna give my ad. I like this. Yeah, and then we'll actually look at the Wikipedia. But then the rival whose gin mill has been burned down, forces the guy to work overtime at his gin mill or something. And the guy who burns down the gin mill is married to a 19-year-old who's he's like a middle-aged man, married to a 19-year-old who's just about to turn 20. And it's revealed that she was married off while her father was still alive in kind of like a rush marriage so that he could give her away. But the understanding was that she would be married off, but the marriage wouldn't be consummated until she was 20. So she's in this married...
Clock's ticking.
Yeah, and there are these scenes, and she sleeps in like a crib, in an unfinished house, in an unfinished bedroom, and sucks her thumb. It's very Lolita and very weird. And I think it's part of the reason it doesn't necessarily translate now is that I think a lot of it was very queer coded. I think they were trying to say one thing but restricted by a million. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So this was a older man, younger man relationship that was sort of being converted into this thing that doesn't quite land the same way. Yeah,
possibly. Yeah. I mean, and they call it. Yeah, and this is Elia Kazan, the guy who directed
Empire Strikes Back, baby.
No. You're
wasn't he?
No. You're confusing him with No, Kazan is the guy who directed Streetcar. Director, not writer. Yeah, no.
Wait, who directed Empire Strikes Back?
Didn't George Lucas direct Empire Strikes Back?
Somebody wrote one of those three Star Wars movies.
I know you're thinking of because we met him. It was
who was that guy?
Oh my God, why can't I remember his name?
Anyway, I thought it was Kazan.
No.
So my bad. I'm just displaying my ignorance here.
Lawrence Kasdan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, hey, that's
all right. No, yeah, it's close enough. No, but it's good. But you watch Baby Doll. Mm-hmm. And it's weird. And the sense of comedy doesn't really like you watch it and it's one of those movies you put on in the background and it's like a mood and you're kind of like, what is happening? And you look at your significant other and you go, what? They describe it as a dramatic black comedy produced by Kazan and Williams. This is the one that the church, the bishop or whoever was the head of at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. It's a pretty major pulpit, railed against this movie.
Hey man, that's success in a way, isn't it?
Well, this is how they describe it. The plot focuses on and here's the other thing. It was adapted from a one-act play, and you can definitely feel, this is a one-act play. By the middle of the movie, you're like, this could have used a second act.
Right.
The plot focuses on a feud between two rival cotton gin owners in rural Mississippi. After one of the men commits arson against the other's gin, the owner retaliates by attempting to seduce the arsonist's 19-year-old virgin bride with the hopes of receiving an admission of her and her husband's guilt.
Okay.
So it's like, culturally, the film has been credited with originating the name and popularity of the baby doll nightgown. So we're at that level of fame here. We're affecting culture and the whole thing. I don't know though. I feel like I got to watch it again because I just didn't get it. I was like, okay, all right, yeah.
Well, yeah, I can see if you trying to turn a one-act play. I mean, it's just not. It's not how a film is structured. Like, even, no matter how much you stretch the conventions of film, it's not gonna lay neatly into a one-act play.
The Wikipedia is funny. Claims of indecency. Baby Doll began garnering controversy prior to its release, spurred by a promotional billboard on display in Manhattan, which depicted an image of Baker lying in a crib, sucking her thumb.
Oh man, that is salacious.
Hey,
was she is she? I'm sure the actress is a stunner for the day.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Oh, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
We have what's her name?
So how involved
Carol Baker.
So okay, well, so Tennessee wrote the screenplay. That was like the one screenplay he wrote.
This is the one that he wrote, and you just know they're like, you got to make it sexy, Tennessee. Right. You gotta play it up. Yeah. Well, because that was his brand. His brand was you could be middle American people and you could go and put the red light on for one night and you could go take a little trip. Yo, you watch Streetcar. Have you been to New Orleans?
I have been to New Orleans.
Yeah, you watch Streetcar. Name a better New Orleans movie?
Yeah, no, it's
it.
Yeah, it's great. And it is sexy. Even for like the time, it's seething with like and Marlon Brando is he's as sexy as it gets at that time. Really? Like it's not my thing, but like you can tell that there's Well, and also just embodying this pure post-war American masculinity, this industrial, danger kind of, very intense. Yeah, when he says we put the colored lights on and you loved it, didn't you love it? And we're gonna get rid of your crazy sister and it's gonna go back to the way things were. Just great. I mean, just oozing sensuality, and that was his brand. And that's why all this media on YouTube, all of these neutered bow tie intellectuals like in New York City and wherever talking about him drive me crazy because it's like, no, this is you gotta everything. This is not polite. This material, right? No, not at all.
The Catholic Church gave it what was the rating? A C for condemned. The Catholic Legion of Decency gave Baby Doll a C.
Oh man,
grievously,
I'm not expecting you to know this, but I kind of wonder how his mother felt about that.
Ooh, right. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, she's still around, right? So.
Yeah. One wonders, but he is raking it in at this point.
Good for him.
Yeah, he's doing it.
I've noticed doing this show, every time we hit the point where this person had some success, I'm always like, yeah.
Oh my God. Especially because he didn't come from much.
Right.
His parents weren't Twitter blue checks. He wasn't handed anything. Really. Right. He went to state schools. Let's go. And now he's the most famous American playwright.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for him.
Love it. Time magazine called Baby Doll, and this is 56. This is after Cat has come out. Time magazine called it just possibly the dirtiest American-made motion picture that has ever been legally exhibited. Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Someone's got to make the dirtiest. So
yeah, let's go. Yeah. So, we're kind of arriving at there's a period in his career where the critics turn on him. And he writes other material, Orpheus Descending, Sweet Bird of Youth, Period of Adjustment. There's a play called Night of the Iguana.
I think I have heard of that.
Yeah, which is I think it's a fascinating title. This is, as a film, actually, I didn't dislike as much as I disliked Baby Doll and what was the other one that I found to be The Rose Tattoo. I just inscrutable. It's one of these things where it's like you put it on a record and you just heard music, but your mind doesn't process it. Right. Sometimes that's a sign that I need to go back and watch it.
Yeah, it can be. That might be that it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, right. I just wasn't in the right place for it. Yeah. So you have the Night of the Iguana, and I think, see, we're getting into, again, you can sort of see the themes that he's into. I think this one would be worth watching if you really get into him. You definitely got to watch Menagerie, Streetcar, Cat, and then this one's kind of fun. It's about an Episcopal priest, Richard Burton, so no slouch, who had a nervous breakdown after being ostracized by his congregation for having an inappropriate relationship with a very young Sunday school teacher. Yeah. So there's that theme again, too, right? Mm-hmm. That age gap problem, which, again, I think for Tennessee stands in for the forbidden eros.
Yeah.
It's something everybody can maybe find relatable. It's just it's always there in the culture, and so much culture is about guarding against it. Yeah,
and there's this thing. So you read that bit about that was sort of an exegesis of this idea of Streetcar Named Desire, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the Night of the Iguana sounds the same. This priest follows some compulsion, and now he's on a train he can't get off of in a certain way.
Yeah, well, for sure. He literally ends up on a tour bus. He giving tours, but it starts with this great scene where the congregation is full at church, and everybody's waiting to see what he's going to say, and he has a meltdown on the pulpit, which is a great way to start a movie.
Yeah, that's great. That is good.
Or a play. So he ends up being a tour guide at a bottom of the barrel Texas company, Blake's Tours, and he takes a group of Baptist school teachers to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, and all these shenanigans take place. Yeah. And
cool.
Yeah, it's fun. That one's kind of fun and worth watching. It just has a little bit of more of a hook. Mm-hmm. I think Tennessee's an example of somebody who was so high that the fall had to be so hard.
Right.
The critics really turned on him sort of in the period after.
So after like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
And then it started to become kind of uneven.
Yeah.
The word is that some of these later plays are worthwhile.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like anything else. You have your 15, your 10, your decade of the hits, and then you stick around too long and you end up playing casinos.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of wind down with Tennessee here. He was living with Merlot, his lover, and we're right around this time. They had a break at one juncture. Let me pull something up.
So he's living in New York this whole time, or
he was between New York and Key West.
Oh, okay.
And at this point, he's so rich, he's going wherever he wants.
Right.
I don't doubt he spent time in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read about Merlot because it's so important. So Merlot was a second-generation Sicilian American who was in the Navy. They vacationed in Italy. That's what inspired him to write The Rose Tattoo, which is a passionate comedy about old lost love and newfound love in the life of a family of Sicilian immigrants. So he's drawing this from his experience meeting Merlot. Mm-hmm. It stands out as the only major play by Williams that has a happy ending.
Oh, okay.
So Merlot was a steadying influence on Tennessee. So you can sort of see Tennessee finds the gutter, is a mess, drinking, drugs.
What was his drug of choice other than alcohol?
I think it was, they say barbiturates.
Oh, okay.
Let me look it up. Yeah, barbiturates. He would talk about the pinks, which are like the little pills. So depressant downers. He would, I mean, as the alcoholism would progress, he would use it to put himself to sleep. That was how he slept. Coffee, cigarettes all day. Right. Oh, now it's time for the bourbon and the pinks. So, yeah, it was said that people were drawn to Tennessee because he was a celebrity, but the ones who stayed with him stayed because of Merlot. So Tennessee is this bright light, this bright beacon, and Merlot is this thing that sort of steadies it. I love this little story, or this anecdote. When once asked by the Hollywood mogul Jack Warner at a dinner party, "And what do you do, young man?" Merlot replied, "I sleep with Mr. Williams." They had a falling out, but when Merlot was diagnosed with lung cancer, Tennessee returned and looked after him until his death in September of 63. So we're after the night of the iguana, and after this, things start to get really bad. The plays after this would play for 29 performances, 12 performances. Oof. Which there was one that closed after 6 performances.
Whoa.
Which starts to get really, really rough. So after the loss of Merlot, Tennessee descended into catatonic depression, drug use, hospitalizations. He was committed a number of times.
Okay.
He submitted to injections by a fellow named Max Jacobson, who's known popularly as Dr. Feelgood.
He was a Dr. Feelgood patient. Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Feelgood.
Right.
How does the song go?
Oh, I don't know, but
he was, and they would talk about vitamin injections, but it was amphetamines.
Yeah, it was the same thing they were giving Jack Kennedy, right?
Oof. Yeah. So he was combining these with Seconal for insomnia. So we're going to send you up. Trust the science, Brad.
Yeah, that's right.
Send you up, and we're going to take you down again. And his mother influenced him to convert to Catholicism, the one true faith. He said with a wink. He joined the Catholic Church, but he claimed never to take it seriously. He never really overcame the dependence on drugs. After this, his mother died in 1980. He's got mama bones, and he would go on these talk shows during this period. And there was a case where, and we're going to listen to it now, where he famously went on a talk show after being let out of a psychiatric ward, and with a very serious slur, a drunken slur, talked about being on the wagon. So we're going to listen to that now. Brad, check your phone. I'm going to send it to you, and we'll come back after that.
Then Dakin took a more drastic step. In 1969, he checked his brother into Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, the psychiatric ward.
He was diagnosed there as dying of acute drug poisoning. And so I had no choice but to keep him in. And so I kept him in for 3 months until I totally dried him out.
Mr. Tennessee Williams.
After his release, Tennessee Williams went on national television.
The David Frost show, Tennessee was clearly drunk. And it was one of the few times that anybody ever saw him swish.
Drunk or not, Tennessee bragged about his newfound sobriety.
Right. I'm on the wagon now, and I must say it feels very strange.
You've given it up.
I allow myself 1 drink a day.
And you've given up sleeping pills as well?
Yes, I had to give them up. I'm just on myself now.
And Frost was egging him on, trying to get him to talk about his homosexuality.
How about the things like the homosexuality and so on? Does everybody live with that too?
Williams dodged the issue, then came up with a one-liner that delighted the audience.
But I've covered the waterfront.
covering the waterfront with Tennessee Williams. Doesn't he? Even though it's tragic at this point.
Yeah.
This is 1970. Things are not.
God,
going
he's a
well.
charismatic guy, though.
You would want to have. I'm sober right now, but you would want to have a drink with this guy.
Oh God, could you imagine stories and the storytelling and the
and the wit, the bon mot, the perfect phrase thrown at the right moment, that sense of timing, which of course you need as a playwright. But not every playwright is able to do that as well. You have a lot of very bookish, very just fun. And the stories, I mean, and if you're interested in more of this, again, that James Grissom book is quite good. Tennessee would employ this young man to go around and to make overtures to all of the people from Tennessee's past, particularly the women, to see if they still loved and cared for him. Because he was he felt very lost near the end. And he wasn't able to reproduce the greatness that he had in the 40s and the 50s. And he says as much in one of the interviews. He goes, I know that I can't produce a great play, but I think I can write a good play that will fill theaters. I'm not senile, he said in one interview. And Dick Cavett has, if you go on YouTube, there's like a 45-minute interview with him. Yeah,
I did watch a bit of that, and it was kind of great. I mean, you could see that things were he wasn't at his peak, but man, again, just a charismatic, funny guy. Like,
can you imagine a Saturday afternoon, you have a Bloody Mary with him in New Orleans, and you walk around the French Quarter?
Oh my God.
Incredible.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. And absolutely. It's a mensch. Yeah.
So there's a period here, which I'll write about, or I'll read rather. I've got writing on my mind now. As Williams grew older, he felt increasingly alone. He feared old age and losing his sexual appeal to younger gay men. In the 70s, when he was in his 60s, Williams had a lengthy relationship with a fellow named Robert Carroll, who was a Vietnam vet, an aspiring writer in his 20s. So again, we've got this age gap thing.
Yeah.
Williams had deep affection for him and respected what he saw in the younger man's talent. Carroll, with Rose, was one of the two people who received a bequest in Williams' will. He described Carroll's behavior as a combination of sweetness and beastliness. Carroll had a drug problem. Some friends saw that relationship as destructive. So you can see, how that relationship might work. When the two men broke up, Williams called Carroll a twerp. But they remained friends. So here's his will. I think this is interesting. I, Thomas Lanier Williams, being in sound mind upon the subject and having declared this wish repeatedly to my close friends, do hereby state my desire to be buried at sea. More specifically, I wish to be buried at sea, at as close a possible point as the American poet Hart Crane died by choice in the sea. This would be ascriminable. There's a word not here. Literally a messed up word. He was probably drunk and stoned. Approximately this geographic point by the various books upon his life and death. I wish to be sewn up in a canvas sack and dropped overboard.
Wow.
So this sense of the dramatic never goes away, right? As stated above, as close as possible to where Hart Crane was given by himself to the great mother of life, which is the sea, the Caribbean, specifically, if that fits the geography of his death. Otherwise, whoever fits it. That is so funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. Well, and so we're go on.
He wants that to be a one act. He wants his death to be a one act play, right? His actual departure. Yeah, that's cool.
That the Catholic Church condemns.
Right. Well.
Yeah. Well, so his death was very shocking, and there was some controversy around his death. On February 25th, 1983, Williams was found dead at age 71 in his suite at the Hotel Elysee, but he called it Easy Lay, the Hotel Easy Lay, because of his action.
I get it.
Yeah. Sorry. Right, I don't need to explain it. Yeah, I think I've driven home my thesis here. In New York City, it's actually in Midtown Manhattan on East 58th.
It's still in operation.
Still exists. Yeah, I used to walk by it. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a Hotel Easy Lay. I should have checked myself in.
Yeah, for sure.
The report was that Williams had choked to death from inhaling the plastic cap of a bottle of the type used on bottles of nasal spray or eye solution.
That's what I had heard. Yeah.
But it was corrected to say that he had been using the cup to ingest barbiturates, and he died from a toxic level of seconal.
Oh, oof. Now accidental.
Right.
Probably. Yeah.
Well, if you watch the kind of mainstream documentary, the A&E biography, you get different points. There's one person argues that he may have been killed because he changed his will. But it just seems like, it seems like a stretch, a little bit of cope.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through, you go, oh my God, how could it be? Right. We could have helped him, blah, blah, blah. We tried, a lot of guilt. So another person was like, he didn't choke on anything. He committed suicide, essentially.
Well,
much. Yeah.
In that kind of thing, you're playing around in that world, and seconal is pretty dangerous to my understanding. And, you might have a moment where you pour one and then, you know what, forget it, pours two, and knowing that that's enough,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or you're so far gone, you don't even know you're doing it.
Yeah.
So it lives in that kind of uneasy realm, but certainly,
but by himself, I'm
by
assuming.
himself in the Hotel Easy Lay in Manhattan. Great, multiple Pulitzer Prize winner, Tony Awards, the whole thing. That's how you go out.
Right.
He left. His brother did not bury him at sea. He's buried at Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, next to his mother. Which is maybe a little painful because he really did not seem to like his time in St. Louis. I'm sure St. Louis is a great town, but I do love the epitaph, or the quote on his grave comes from Camino Real, a play of his, which was kind of in the period just before Cat, kind of after Streetcar, just before Cat.
Okay.
The quote is, "The violets in the mountains have broken the rocks." This sort of beautiful, little poetic
little poem.
Yeah, and he's buried next to his mother, and then his sister. And there's a quote from one of his plays on her grave. "Blow out your candles, Laura," which in Menagerie, I believe, is sort of, it's a line suggesting you're just give up your hope, blow out your candles. It's time for the end. So that's lovely. And his headstone is quite cool. On one side, it's Thomas Lanier Williams III, XYZ, and then on the other side, it's Tennessee Williams, poet, playwright.
Nice.
And so there's this idea of this constructed identity. There's a lovely letter that he wrote to his mother, which I thought I would read before we ask the traditional question.
Yeah.
But I just think this is lovely. Let me find it. I want to find it here. Let's go. So this is this comes from the book from James Grissom, the Follies of God, Tennessee Williams and the Women of the Fog. The other book that I was referencing is Tom, the Unknown Tennessee Williams. Got these at the library. And this is Tennessee. He wrote a letter to his mother on a napkin after hearing the Andrews sisters sing, "I'll be with you in apple blossom time." So it's almost like a poem to his mother. I think this is lovely. "I think of organza and linen, my nose pressed into her bosom, the slightly singed smell where the iron pressed into the fabric, my face rubbed raw by the fabric. Comfort, discomfort, I am not moving. Tell me something, tell me anything. When did you realize that to survive, you would need to stumble in the dark rooms of reality until you found a door to a closet, perhaps, that once opened held a dream or a memory? And suddenly, Mama, you could face grocery lists and altar society meetings and congregation with my father and me. Tell me, Mama, what did you give to me and where is it now? Yeah. So Tennessee Williams, the great, you gotta respect it. If you're interested in the theater, he influenced a generation of American playwrights, English playwrights. He influenced John Osborne, who wrote the famous play "Look Back in Anger," the angry young men movement in London in the UK. And he continues to influence people. His plays are still performed very widely, and the film material is out there if you want to get it. You can't do any better than Streetcar. Just put Streetcar on and like dig in, enjoy.
Yeah, it's an amazing. Yeah, that's an amazing film for sure.
Yeah. What would Tennessee be doing now?
I was going to ask you that. I mean, so what? First, is he on Twitter or not?
Oh, he's for sure on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's that busy on Twitter. I think he's probably a little old-fashioned. I think he's definitely a literary man on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He's a blue check. And he's a little above it all, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, and I don't want to dig into it too deep, but we live in such politicized times, and I never got any sense of his politics.
Yeah,
and you don't get really any in his work either.
That's a very good point. You think about Streetcar, and you think about the way Streetcar. He described, and we'll dig a little deeper into this on our Patreon episode. If you go to After Dark, patreon.com/art of dark pod rather, and we're on Twitter at Art of Dark Pod. If you like the show, chuck us a little bit of money each month. We put a lot of time and effort into these, and if you enjoy it,
do.
Yep. And if you don't want to support us materially, send us a note on Twitter. We like hearing from people. We really
subscribe
do.
Or tell your friends.
Yeah, give us a 5-star on iTunes, whatever.
That'd be great.
We love doing this, and it's very enriching and worthwhile. It's interesting because I looked up Tennessee Williams on, we'll get back to the previous thread, but I looked up Tennessee Williams on iTunes, and it's just like on the podcast search, and it's like,
there's nothing.
There's not a whole lot, and I don't. Nobody can do anything definitive about any of these great writers, by the way. These great creative people. That's the whole point. Their lives defy it.
Yeah.
But
we could have done an entire episode just as long as this on Streetcar.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So what was the question before? It was
what's he doing? He's on Twitter. Yeah. He's a literary man. I was going
to go more deeply into one of the. Oh, see, now I can't go back to the thread, but we'll dig more into the line of
politics stuff.
Oh, the politics. That's what it was. Yeah. No, when you think about Streetcar, in one of the interviews, he said that Streetcar was about, because this is a very funny thing. What is Streetcar about? Capital A about.
Right.
This is the sign of great art.
Yeah.
What is a Rothko about?
Right.
What is Streetcar about? He said it's something to the effect of it's a cry on behalf of the sensitive people of the world. Be more gentle. Don't be so rough with us. And you can see where that lives in that play, but it has all of this wonderful post-war tension. You've got the old South, which has fallen into ruin, which is romantic and fanciful. And Blanche herself says, I never lied in my heart. She's living in this romantic fantasia. And then you've got Stanley, the union man, the factory man, who's virile in his own way, but is the antithesis to her. And they're in this cauldron. And then you just have these basic, wonderful dramatic ironies, right? She thinks she's going to lure the friend, Stanley's friend, into marriage, and these women have to find. You could see both in Menagerie and in Streetcar this women who are aging into their dotage, aging out. Yeah, and this is something that's still, again, Twitter age discourse. I mean, he might be right in there. Who knows? I didn't get a huge impression of his politics. I mean, on one of the late shows or whatever, one of the talk shows, he predicted that we would end up in some sort of nuclear holocaust or whatever. That was not really his forte.
And I wouldn't expect it to be. I kind of appreciate it. It's actually,
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Right. It's like, the artists, I don't think the artist's job is to like convince you to vote for a certain political
one party or the other, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean you don't believe in anything. It's just like you're supposed to be operating at a different level than that.
You would have to assume that he would be left leaning because of his politics, but it's but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah,
so you're right though. This has been a relief because it sort of stands aloof. It's extremely personal. It's about the erotic, and it's about memory, and it's about madness and the fear of going mad, which I think is such a pertinent topic right now. I think,
God. Yeah, I feel like we're all kind of afraid of that.
We're all, it's the menagerie, right? The light shooting through the little glass figurines of our ego. And one bad move and suddenly you're canceled and it's broken.
Right. There
well, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk for another 20 or 30 minutes on the After Dark episode, which is for Patreon subscribers. And we hope if you enjoy it, you'll go do that. Brad?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, Kevin, that was great. Tennessee Williams is one of those people that I haven't entirely missed. As I said, I've seen a couple of the films. But he's one of those guys who I always knew was sort of on the Mount Rushmore of American letters, but never really understood what his deal was, and I feel like I do now. So I appreciate it.
Well, and maybe somewhere in heaven he's up there covering the waterfront. All right, we'll talk after dark.
Yep.
See you in a bit. Bye.